We've just been reading the newspaper front pages, but obviously when you are in a party conference, sometimes there's a bit of a bubble. Is the outside world intruding? Are people talking about events in the world, or is it all just about the leadership contest?
Leadership contest. I think the outside world, whether it's Strictly or Lebanon, is not really intruding in here. It is a bubble. It happens in party conferences. You've got a ring of steel, security, as if they were still in government, but once you come through that ring of steel, you find they're not in government. It's all pretty relaxed. No one really has any security in here. If you went to the Labour conference last week, all the main ministers had police officers with them. You could see the badges signifying they were there. But here, it's a kind of it's a party trying to put on, I would say, a cheerful face after a drubbing in the polls.
Someone said to me that it's like one of the stages of grief. You have 5 stages of grief, don't you? The first stage of grief being denial. There is a sense of that here. They've had the biggest defeat in their history. And yesterday, the big conversation was, has Kemi Badenoch been misrepresented? I have to say, most people I spoke to here yesterday did not think she'd been misrepresented by the media when she said maternity pay is too high. So I think she suffered a big setback yesterday, and Robert Jenrick, I saw him at various events yesterday. He had a real spring in his step because he's the beneficiary. She does very badly.
There's always a danger, isn't there, that when you are at these conferences and you're trying to become the leader, the interviews and appearances can go wrong and make things worse. We had yesterday Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat on the platform doing a Q&A. Today it's Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly. We're talking to Robert Jenrick later. Yesterday, did Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat, did they do well in front of the delegates? Did people think they've got the answers, or was it one of those times where it'd have been better if they just sat in the dressing room?
Yeah, I think probably in the dressing room. No, there's some warmth gathering. You can see it growing for Tugendhat.
Yeah, for sure.
Badenoch didn't do herself any harm, but she didn't do herself any good. And, of course, she was comparing herself to Margaret Thatcher. Now, I remember the last Mrs T was Liz Truss. And it didn't go down very well, but I was surprised. She kind of said, I was misunderstood the way Thatcher was when she was talking about there is no such thing as society, just families and individuals. It's weird to do that. And Thatcher casts a long shadow over the Conservative Party even now, particularly female candidates for leader. But you normally wait for others to compare you to Thatcher, as happened to Theresa May, happened to Truss, as I mentioned. Yeah, Kemi, well, I suppose she's in a hole. She wants to keep on digging.
The real problem they've got here, I think, is... Yeah, sorry, Susanna.
I was
going to say, it's how do they cut through? How do they cut through?
OK, I'm going to ask you, because your great hero is Margaret Thatcher. And as Kevin alludes to, huge figure in Conservative Party history. Andrew, as a natural Conservative, paint the viewers a brief portrait of all 4 candidates and who would be the best to match your heroine. Come on, if you can't get excited about it, you can't expect the viewers to.
I know. Well, I'll try. So Kemi Badenoch, we know who she is. She's probably one of the least experienced of the contenders. She's been a minister. She's of Nigerian origin. She's very punchy. She's very direct speaking, but she gets herself into a lot of trouble. James Cleverly, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, the first black Foreign Secretary in this country. Nice but dull, I would say, with James Cleverly, being truthful. Tom Tugendhat, to get his surname right. He's the soldier. Now, he had a distinguished military career. He's going to draw a lot on his military career and say, in these troubled times, the world is a very unsafe place, you need somebody who's actually was in the armed service for 20 years. And then you've got the other one, Jenrick, who I think will win.
Kemi Cleverly.
Robert Jenrick, who I think will win. So he was a lawyer. He's a clever lawyer. There's no doubt about that. He's a very good speaker. Tomorrow we'll get all 4 of them speaking on the platform. He'll speak without notes. He'll try and do what David Cameron did. That's how David Cameron won the Tory leadership contest in 2005. Came from nowhere, did a speech without notes. It's very clever, very compelling. His point is he was an immigration minister. He quit the government, unlike Badenoch, unlike Tugendhat, unlike Cleverly, because the Tories were so useless on immigration.
No,
that's why he quit. That's his pitch.
That's his pitch.
And that's his pitch to the voters. I realise that the Tory government was failing on immigration. He's right, they were. They did uselessly on immigration. His lot are going to do even worse, by the way. So he quit the government. So he says he's got the least blemished record. But the point is, the four of them are struggling to make their case for why they are the compelling reason to vote. I speak to people all the time. Most people here I speak to haven't made up their mind.
Yeah, look, if anybody's still watching and listening, Robert Jenrick quit because he was twice passed over for Home Secretary, Cyril Abraham and James Cleverly.
There is that.
And he's known as Robert Generic because he will be anything you want him to be. Look, they're in a hole. There isn't an outstanding candidate. No. But in fairness, you've got to get elected and then you try and make your mark. Margaret Thatcher, when she was the shock surprise selection in the 1970s as the Tory leader, she wasn't particularly well known. She'd been the education secretary. She was known as Maggie Thatcher, the milk snatcher, taking away free milk from kids.
All us kids hated the milk.
But she then came through. So it feels like a real sideshow here. And after 14 years of power, and we were coming, all the power was here, and they mattered. All of a sudden they don't, but they will again at some point, because it's important to have an opposition party, and you never know what's going to happen with a governing party.
And actually, the biggest queue yesterday here to hear various people speak was not for any of the leadership contenders. It was for, actually, Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, who lasted 49 days, as you know. The queue was round the block. I only got
She's
in.
Off our block.
I only got in for the last 10 minutes. But she was unrepentant. She says she's going to be back. Not yet, but she'll be back as an MP. And I think she doesn't harbour ambitions to be leader again. But she says if she had been Prime Minister right up to the general election, the Tory election result would have been completely different. She doesn't say they'd have won, but she said it wouldn't have been such a bad defeat.
But when she was asked if she wanted to be back as an MP, and she does, but she didn't quite say it forcefully, the room was quiet. And it was only when the interviewer said, "Come on, we want her back," there was a bit of smattering of applause, and she picked that up. Like, she's part of the past. I think if the Conservative Party wants to move on, make itself relevant again, it wants to change, it wants to get people to vote for it, it's got to ditch Liz Truss because she's got so many bad memories for people paying higher mortgages.
But Kevin,
she hasn't got a seat.
But Kevin, Andrew, of the four candidates, the candidate who is pitching himself closest to Liz Truss's position is actually Robert Jenrick, compared to the other three. You've had Theresa May, John Major, David Cameron, George Osborne, all these former Prime Ministers and Chancellors saying the Conservatives have to move to the centre ground, take on the Liberal Democrats, take on Labour in the centre. And the person who is most going to the right, the only one who's saying leave the European Convention on Human Rights is Robert Jenrick. He's the one who's the most Truss-like candidate of the four. Is that fair?
Yeah, but you see, but Theresa May and David Cameron didn't have to fight a resurgent Nigel Farage. Farage has got 5 MPs, Reform's got 5 MPs. They are the reason why the Tory party... It's not because his mate, Keir Starmer, was so loved. The reason the Tories did so badly was because Reform nicked so many of their votes. Dozens and dozens of Tory MPs lost their seat because Reform got thousands of votes at their expense because people just saw the Tory party as failing on immigration and failing on so many areas. So,
on everything.
And Reform are big and strong, and they're now second in 92 or 94 seats to the Labour Party. Jacob Rees-Mogg was here yesterday. Yeah. He lost his seat as well. Why Reform thought it was in their interest to get one of the arch-Brexiteers out of Parliament, but that's what happened. Yeah. He was saying the Tories have to do a deal with Reform and not stand in seats where they know they can't win, the Tories, where they are second to Labour and Reform can beat Labour. So that's what Jenrick is saying. We've got to get those Reform voters back. That's why he's pitching to say we've got to come out of the European Convention.
And then he leaves the centre-right, centre-left flank totally exposed for Liberal Democrats and Labour. The Conservative Party, they've got to have this debate you're kind of having now. They've got to decide what do they stand for? Who are they pitching for? And if you race off after Farage and Reform, you leave the other side to Labour and the Lib Dems. They've got to have that debate. I think Jenrick, as you know, Ed, George Osborne's detected, really wants it. He seems to want it more than the others. But I think Badenoch's the more interesting character. I think they would do better if they took Tugendhat, because they could get a wider appeal. But they've got to go through that, and it's the stages of grief, but they're still in denial. And whoever is elected leader, I suspect, will not be there at the general election. I think it's going to be an Ian Duncan Smith type interim leader.
Well, that's the trouble with this lot, because the next leader will be the 5th leader the Tory party's had since the summer of 2019. It's astonishing. They're behaving like a banana republic, if I'm still allowed to use that expression, which I'm probably not.
No, I'm not.
Andrew, I want to ask you...
I think funny, Banana Republic normally have the same leader, actually. I think that was the idea. They just have the same strong person.
I want to ask you, Andrew, about the European Convention on Human Rights. So... yeah. How popular do you think taking the UK out of the ECHR would be? I mean, we hear the argument that there's 2 other countries which are not members, Russia and Belarus, and who wants to be in that club? But Robert Jenrick seems to want to be in that club, and how popular would that make him?
I think it's popular here. I think it's popular in this conference. If you talk to people, say, well, he's clear on it, because Tugendhat is saying, I might take us out of the European Court of Human Rights. Jenrick is adamant, we will, and he actually said, if we don't, the Tory party dies. It is the Reform position, of course, too. Because people... But what he's basically saying is he doesn't want any judges anymore getting involved in our decisions. I mean, I don't know why we just didn't ignore the European courts on things like the Rwanda bill. I'd have just said, thanks very much for your ruling. We don't know who you are. You're an anonymous judge. You've blocked the Rwanda flight, but thank you very much. It's our country. We're shipping these people out. The plane is going. What would have happened? Would it have been the end of the world? It's what countries in Europe do all the time, particularly France. However, I think Jenrick's position is clear. It's clarity. It's clear blue water with his lot. And it will shoot Farage's fox. But there'll be I suspect some Tories will quit or even defect because they would be so appalled by it.
I think the obsession with it shows they've lost touch with the country, because both Cleverly and Badenoch, Cleverly, remember, was Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary, have said it wasn't the European Convention that stopped the deportation to Rwanda. It just wasn't. It was or stop the small boats. It was the failure of the government to be able to control a situation.
It was a European judge.
Tugendhat, as a security minister, thought it would have been bonkers to leave. He's now kind of flirted with possibly leaving, but only because he knows he's got to win an internal election in a Conservative party that does not represent the right of Britain, never mind the whole of Britain.
Kevin is usually misrepresenting it. It was a judge from the European Court blocked the flight going to Rwanda. We don't even know the name of the judge. We don't even know the gender of the judge. We don't know which country they came from. What a disgrace.
Andrew,
and what the British government should have said was, thank you very much. Up yours, we're the government, the flight's going. However, they didn't do that. They went along with it, they kowtowed to it, they kowtowed to the European Court. And so what Jenrick is saying is, we're not doing it anymore, we're going to make our own decision. And I think that cuts a lot of ice here.
Yeah, God, I used to hear this about Brexit. Get out of the European Union, you'd all be wading through milk and honey. Didn't turn out like that way. You know it's because the government failed to implement
the European Court. Judge blocked it.
A proper, effective immigration policy. That's what it was.
It's why the judge blocked it.
If you'd have got your act together, you had a proper appeal system, you did it properly, you would have had people on your flights to Rwanda. But you know your problem with your flights to Rwanda? One, they would have proved nothing worked because it was only a few hundred people and it wasn't a deterrent. Until you move on from that, you will never get any progress.
Can I interrupt just for a moment?
A European judge blocked it.
Yeah, can I interrupt? People did vote to take back control, Kevin. And so when they were told that we would take back control, those voters must find it confusing that there's still a European body that controls our immigration policy.
Hang on. But you know the European this court is nothing to do with the European Union. It's completely separate. It was set up with a big push of Winston Churchill and Britain after the Second World War. It's nothing to do with the European Union. That confusion, yes, can mislead people, can make them, thinking what's going on. The European Court is very, very different. It's from the European Convention on Human Rights. Very different.
We've got a Supreme Court.
And if you want,
why do we need a European Court meddling and interfering in our affairs?
It's an international court. Do people want to leave NATO? That's an international body. Do they want to leave the Geneva Convention? Do they want to leave rights on maritime and air transport? Do they want to leave the World Trade Organization? These are all international. Do they want to leave the UN? Look, we live in a world. We live in a world.
I probably do.
And no.
I probably do.
Oh, you're not. No.
But Andrew,
there we are. We heard that. He wants to leave the United Nations now.
Andrew, it is a fair question. It is a fair question. There was a referendum in 2016, take back control. There was a general election in 2019, which Boris Johnson won with a big majority. Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister. So was Liz Truss. If you are right that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights would have solved the problem, why didn't Boris Johnson and Liz Truss do it?
Well, Liz Truss didn't have time.
Well, Liz Truss wasn't there for long enough. Liz Truss wasn't there for long enough, that's for sure. That's for sure.
But she wasn't even trying. She wasn't even trying to do anything.
No, she wasn't.
Why didn't they do it?
But look, I think, perhaps they should have, because the fact is, everything else failed. The fact is that I don't know. I'm not in charge. I'm not.
Because it's crazy.
But the fact is, that flight was blocked. That flight to Rwanda was blocked by a European judge. We weren't even told what nationality that judge was or what age, who they were. It was done in the middle of the night. Outrageous. Outrageous. In my view, the government should have ignored it and sent the flight anyway. Jenrick is saying, we're not going to have any more of this, any more interference.
Why didn't Boris Johnson do what you say?
Well, actually, because he doesn't. I think he had his time. I think if he looks back, perhaps he thinks he should have, because he knows that part of the reason he was defeated, he came unstuck. They failed on immigration. This Tory government we had for years and years failed on immigration, and Rwanda was a chance. His lot cancelled the flights. And perhaps the only way to make it got those flights here, if we'd come out of the European Court, those flights would have taken off.
You wasted £700 million.
The reason why he didn't do it is because it would have...
Why do we need these judges interfering?
Because it would have destroyed the Good Friday Agreement and peace in Northern Ireland. It would have put us in a camp with Russia and Belarus, and actually our own courts would have taken the same view on these human rights issues anyway. They didn't do it because the advice to them was you would be completely stark raving bonkers, and it's only afterwards they say, well, maybe we should have. When they're actually in there, they don't.
Right, I don't recall the Supreme Court blocking the flights to Rwanda.
It's the individual cases. It's not the flights themselves. No.
The Supreme Court did not block that flight to Rwanda. It was the European...
No.
It was a European judge whom we don't even know his nationality or whether it was man or a woman.
The Supreme Court...
Outrageous.
The UK Supreme Court...
Whether it was a man or a woman.
...ruled on the legality of the flight.
Well, the point I'm making, Susanna, it was so shrouded in secrecy, we weren't told the nationality of the judge. There's how many countries in the European Court? 43, 44? We didn't even know what nationality they were, who they were. We weren't told their identity, so we could challenge them. Outrageous.
The British government will know all the details of the judge.
Why can't the public be told?
Well, you asked the last government, which didn't tell people. Of course they would have known who it was. I mean, this is...
Done in the middle of the night. So Jenrick is pushing...
Yeah, that's because the flight was going to take off.
Jenrick is pushing, I think, an interesting area because the immigration... There's huge unease in this country about the level of immigration coming to this country, legal and illegal immigration, and it's a big issue, and his lot don't seem to click how bad an issue it is, and if they don't get a grip with it, Reform are going to reap a big dividend in the next election, particularly at the Labour Party's expense.
If the Labour Party or the UK Labour government had a vote in this Tory leadership contest, they would vote for Robert Jenrick, and the reason is they think he is Nigel Farage without the beery charm. And that, therefore, you'll have two blokes on the hard right fighting over a small section of the electorate, leaving the rest of the country for other people.
Well, if you
because they'll all be going on about the European Convention of Human Rights while the country is thinking about the economy and it's thinking about public services and it's thinking about crime and how to fill in the potholes and have a better life.
The Supreme Court did hold unanimously that the government's Rwanda scheme was unlawful.
Yeah.
Substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda would face a real risk of ill treatment as a result of being returned to their country of origin.
They did, however...
Then the government passed legislation to override that. Sorry, you're right. I'd forgotten the... just said, look, black is white.
Yeah. OK, I want to talk about something completely different, because I'm sure that you're very pleased, Andrew and Kevin, that Harry is back again, Prince Harry. And before you both go... But before Kevin goes, oh, royal family, and Andrew goes, oh, Prince Harry, what a menace. He's back for a very good reason. It was the Well Child Awards. And you can't criticise him for this because they are awards to honour sick children. And he has an absolutely wonderful way of interacting with the families. And I can imagine for all of the families and the children there, it's just a blessing to sit with him and chat with him. Andrew, do you want to talk about Prince Harry in anything other than a negative way this morning?
Well, I'm so thrilled to see him interacting with families. It's just a pity he can't interact with his own. It's a pity he can't interact with his own, and it's a pity his wife can't interact with her own. I mean, good luck to Prince Harry. I think he just shows what good things he can do, and it's such a shame he's lost his way so badly, I think, with the British public, because he's conducted almost a war against his own family, and I think that's really sad. If you have a family dispute, best do it in private.
Look, it's the good things he does, and I'm thrilled for those kids who are there because they all look really happy. I do wonder, though, whether these star-studded events make much difference for the millions, tens of millions of kids who are living in poverty, don't get educated, girls get sexually assaulted, don't have access to toilets, suffering from malaria. It might make some people feel good, but I wonder if it does have a real impact in the world.
Yeah, I think that Prince Harry would probably say that those are issues that he also draws attention to with his charity work. But, yes, interesting point you make, Andrew, about the fact that, there is still that sort of just ongoing rift within his own family, which I think is just sad for everybody involved.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's not going to... I mean,
big soap opera.
We don't know, but I'm not sure he's even going to visit his family on this trip. And independent of your view of Harry, don't you just wish that they could find a way to get it back together? It would just be so much better for everybody, and we wouldn't have to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Ed, they don't trust him. The King doesn't trust him and William doesn't trust him because they speak to him and they think it's all going to end up on an American chat show. That's the problem. Or in another book, or in another TV, or in a Netflix documentary. How does he monetize his life? By slagging off his family. Really sad.